The salty air of Coronado Bay stung Rachel Hayes' lungs as she stepped off the bus. The waves crashed against the shore with a rhythm that felt both soothing and menacing, echoing the pounding of her heart. Around her, the sprawling training compound buzzed with activity. Recruits jogging in formation, instructors barking orders, and the unmistakable smell of sweat, sand, and fear hanging in the air. Rachel adjusted the straps of her pack, feeling the weight of her boots on the wet sand, and took a deep breath. She was here for one purpose: to prove herself in the most grueling military program on the planet. She had anticipated skepticism, whispers, sideways glances, doubt, but nothing had fully prepared her for the sight of 12 male recruits staring openly at her. Their eyes were sharp, measuring, assessing her in ways she'd encountered before, in boardrooms and conference rooms. But never like this. Never on a battlefield where physical strength, endurance, and raw nerve were paramount. Among men who had spent months in preparation for this test, she was the anomaly, the wild card. To them, she was an outsider, a woman attempting the impossible. Rachel's mind flicked briefly to the long path that had led her here. From her first day at the Naval Academy to her rigorous years as a lieutenant in special operations, she had faced skepticism and subtle prejudice, always proving herself through results, not words. But this was different. This was a crucible designed not for politics, not for titles, but for raw survival, courage, and stamina. The sea, the sand, the sun, the constant push toward exhaustion. It respected no rank, no gender, and no excuses. An instructor's voice cut through the low murmur of the recruits, sharp as a whip. Listen up. Every one of you is here because you want to be a Navy SEAL. But no one here is special. Not until you prove it. You'll face pain, exhaustion, fear. You'll be tested until you want to quit. Some of you will fail. Some of you will quit. Some of you will be sent home. Survival is earned. Respect is earned. Strength is earned. Rachel felt the weight of his words settle over her like a storm cloud. She knew what he meant. Every step of the upcoming training would push her to physical and emotional limits she hadn't yet encountered. Every decision she made in the next weeks would be observed, critiqued, and judged. And in a group of 12 male recruits, she would be under a microscope like no other. Yet there was no fear in her eyes, only focus, determination, and an unwavering certainty that she belonged here as much as anyone. The 12 recruits shifted, whispering among themselves. Some exchanged incredulous looks, others smirked, and a few outright scoffed. Rachel ignored them, adjusting her gear and squaring her shoulders. Her mind began running through routines, techniques, and drills she had practiced for months. Every step she would take in the sand, every breath she would draw in the surf, every push-up, every sprint, she had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Her body remembered, even if the others doubted her. As they lined up for the first physical assessment, the infamous physical screening test, Rachel noticed the subtle signs of anxiety among some recruits. Her own heart beat fast, but not from fear. It was anticipation, the same adrenaline that would fuel her in battle. She clenched her fists and recited a mantra silently. Focus, endure, overcome. The test began with a sprint along the wet sand. The recruits surged forward, legs pumping, arms swinging. Rachel stayed in rhythm, her breathing controlled, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The first few dozen meters were brutal, the sand shifting beneath their feet like quicksand, demanding extra energy. Some of the men began to lag, and Rachel noticed them glancing at her. A flicker of disbelief crossing their faces when they realized she kept pace, sometimes even leading. Next came push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups, the classic triad of tests designed to measure upper body and core strength. Rachel lowered herself to the ground, feeling the coarse sand scrape against her palms. muscles straining under the weight of exhaustion already setting in. Each repetition was precise, controlled. She could hear grunts, curses, and gasps around her, but she kept her rhythm, letting her body speak louder than any words could. Between exercises, the recruits caught their breath, murmuring to one another. One of the men, tall and broad-shouldered, muttered something under his breath about her being a political recruit, someone sent to break barriers rather than earn them. Rachel ignored the comment, but it fueled a fire inside her. Let them doubt me. Let them whisper. I will prove them wrong with action, not argument. After the initial tests, the instructor blew a whistle, signaling the start of a series of drills designed to push stamina and teamwork. Rachel followed the pack through obstacle courses, rope climbs, and wading into the surf. Every motion was calculated, every move efficient. She noticed the recruits slowing at the water's edge, struggling against the cold, relentless waves. Rachel's body adapted, the salt water biting at her skin, her muscles burning, yet she moved as if the ocean itself were an ally, not an adversary. As the day drew on, the sun began to sink low over the horizon, casting long shadows over the training grounds. The recruits' energy waned, but Rachel's resolve remained steady. She had survived the first day without faltering. For the first time, some of the men looked at her with a hint of respect, not admiration, not acceptance, but recognition. She had arrived not as a novelty, but as a contender. That evening, the recruits gathered near the mess hall, exhausted and shivering. Some huddled together, whispering about the day's trials. Rachel stood slightly apart, towel around her shoulders, scanning the group. Her eyes met those of one of the most skeptical recruits. For a brief moment, he looked away, ashamed to admit that she had outperformed him on more than one drill. Rachel allowed herself a small, private smile. As darkness settled over Coronado Bay, she reflected on what lay ahead. Days of Hell Week, grueling physical tests, underwater drown-proofing, and sleep deprivation were yet to come. But she knew something fundamental. This was where she belonged. She would face doubt, pain, and fear, but she would endure. And when it was over, they would all remember the day she arrived, silent, determined, and unshakable. Because in that moment, the 12 recruits were not just her classmates, they were witnesses. And Rachel Hayes was ready to prove that she had earned her place among them, every step of the way. The sun rose over Coronado Bay, casting a harsh glare on the wet sand and shimmering surf. Rachel Hayes awoke before the first call of the bugle, her body already humming from the previous day's exertion. She knew that this day, like every day in SEAL training, would test not only her body, but her mind and spirit. Today, the 12 male recruits would measure her resolve more closely than ever, their skeptical eyes always lingering, waiting for a single misstep. The morning began with the standard physical warm-up, a brutal series of stretches and calisthenics designed to loosen muscles while simultaneously testing endurance. Rachel moved with precision, her body bending, twisting, and flexing as if it were perfectly attuned to the demands of the day. Around her, the men grimaced, some silently doubting whether she could sustain such effort over the coming weeks. She caught snippets of whispered bets, some claiming she'd falter within the hour, others quietly noting that she seemed unstoppable. After the warm-up, the instructors lined the recruits along the shore. The first trial of the morning, sprint drills in chest-deep surf, timed to perfection. Each wave slammed into their bodies, as if testing their determination. The cold water bit through wet uniforms, muscles tensed against the chill, and sand shifted beneath their feet. Rachel surged forward with controlled strength, every stride deliberate. Her breathing was steady, almost rhythmic, while several recruits stumbled or slowed, the shock of the icy water making their legs heavy and unresponsive. One tall recruit, broad-shouldered and confident, cast a sideways glance at her, his jaw tight with disbelief. She's keeping pace? She's even ahead at times, he thought, forcing his legs to match hers. For Rachel, the race was less about speed and more about mental control, about staying composed when chaos surrounded her. Every wave that hit her, every step sinking into wet sand, reminded her of why she was here, not for recognition, but for mastery over herself. The sprint ended with the recruits collapsing onto the sand, gasping for breath, muscles trembling. The instructors wasted no time. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, go. Their voices echoed, harsh and unforgiving. Rachel dropped into the classic triad of exercises, arms and core engaged fully. Each movement was measured, each repetition precise. She could hear the groans, grunts, and expletives around her, some recruits struggling just to maintain rhythm. She noticed a few of the men casting incredulous glances her way, seeing her flawless technique in contrast to their own faltering bodies. Between exercises, brief moments of rest allowed the recruits to gulp down air and scan their surroundings. Some tried to whisper doubts about Rachel, claiming she must have some unfair advantage or that her presence was politically motivated. Rachel didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her performance was her answer. Every movement, every repetition, every controlled breath silently shouted louder than any argument. She was not here to debate her place. She was here to earn it, in every way that mattered to the SEAL Brotherhood. The morning continued with obstacle courses and teamwork drills, designed to test agility, endurance, and cooperation under duress. Rachel ran rope climbs with grace, swung across muddy pits, and vaulted walls with perfect form. Sweat stung her eyes, sand scraped her skin, yet her determination never wavered. Several recruits struggled with the same obstacles, frustration and fatigue setting in, and Rachel noticed their glances, a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. Then came the team lift and carry exercise. Each recruit had to lift the heavy log and carry it along a prescribed course through sand and surf. The log was unyielding, rough, and heavy beyond words. Several of the men grumbled and hesitated, some attempting to let Rachel take more weight, assuming she might falter. Instead, she took the log with steady hands, feeling the familiar burn in her shoulders, but refusing to let it dictate her pace. She moved in rhythm with the team, refusing to give way to either arrogance or hesitation. One recruit muttered under his breath, loud enough for Rachel to hear, "She's slowing us down?" He tried to shift more weight onto her shoulders, a subtle challenge. Rachel didn't break her rhythm. Her calm, unwavering composure was a quiet rebuke. The instructors barked corrections, and the team pressed on, muscles straining, waves crashing over their feet. Rachel's endurance became a benchmark for the men, a silent standard they couldn't ignore. By midday, the recruits were exhausted, bodies drenched, muscles burning, minds stretched thin. Yet Rachel's presence remained steady, unwavering. She moved with economy, making every motion count, and rarely faltered under the relentless sun. She began to notice subtle shifts in the men's attitudes. The whispers of doubt were replaced by glances of respect, some tentative, some grudging. For the first time, she sensed that she was no longer just an outsider. She was a contender, someone who could keep pace with the strongest and most determined among them. The afternoon introduced water-based endurance drills, including timed swims against strong currents and underwater maneuvering exercises. The recruits' limbs began to tremble with fatigue, lungs burning, and spirits fraying. Rachel dove in without hesitation, her strokes powerful and controlled. When the cold waves slammed against her, she used them to sharpen her focus rather than disrupt it. The men around her were struggling, sputtering, gasping, while she moved with fluid precision. By the time they reached the far buoy and turned back, several recruits were panting, slumping in the water, or openly questioning their ability to continue. Rachel, by contrast, emerged strong, breathing steadily, muscles taut but controlled. During a brief rest period on the shore, one of the recruits approached her cautiously. You're not supposed to be able to do this," he muttered, almost ashamed. Rachel looked at him without judgment. "I'm here because I belong," she said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. He blinked, caught off guard by her calm conviction. Around them, other recruits watched silently. They didn't cheer, they didn't clap, but the air was charged with a subtle shift. Respect, once withheld, was beginning to bloom. As the sun began to sink low in the sky, the recruits lined up for the final exercise of the day, a long-distance sprint across uneven terrain into the surf, followed by a timed obstacle challenge. Muscles screamed, lungs burned, and mental endurance was tested like never before. Rachel moved forward, measured, deliberate, with eyes fixed on the finish line. The recruits tried to keep pace, but many faltered under the strain. The instructors watched with approving nods. They could see the mark of a true SEAL in her movements. By the time the exercise ended, dusk had painted the sky in streaks of orange and red. The 12 recruits collapsed onto the sand, gasping, dripping with sweat and salt water. Rachel, though exhausted, remained composed, scanning the group with quiet awareness. The day had been brutal, yet she had survived every challenge, every test, and every skeptical glance thrown her way. For the first time, the recruits saw her as more than an anomaly. She was capable, she was resilient, and she was earning her place, step by step. As night fell over Coronado Bay, Rachel stood alone at the edge of the surf, the waves lapping at her boots. The chill of the evening air contrasted with the warmth of accomplishment inside her chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, greater obstacles, and a deeper test of her strength and spirit. But tonight, she allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. She was here. She was strong. And she was ready. The 12 recruits may have doubted her at first glance, but by the end of the day, even they had to acknowledge a truth. Rachel Hayes was not just surviving. She was commanding respect through sheer skill, endurance, and unwavering focus. And this was only the beginning. The sun barely peeked over the horizon when the recruits assembled for another grueling day. Rachel Hayes had slept fitfully, muscles sore and bruised from the relentless trials of the previous day, but her mind was sharp. She knew the real test wasn't just physical. It was psychological. Every glance, every whisper, every sideways smirk from the 12 male recruits was designed to unnerve her. Today, she would face the unspoken challenge, earning respect not through words, but through action. The first hours were a repeat of brutal endurance exercises. Long-distance sprints in chest-deep surf, pull-ups on slick metal bars, and a sequence of burpees and push-ups until muscles trembled with fatigue. Rachel moved with precision, her breathing steady, her body tuned to the rhythm of pain. Around her, the men struggled, some faltering, others gritting their teeth to maintain pace. There were no special considerations for her. None expected any, and that suited her perfectly. She was here to prove herself, not seek approval. By late morning, tension simmered to the surface. One of the recruits, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a temper as volatile as the surf, muttered loud enough for others to hear, "She's slowing us down. The instructors must be blind to let her do this." The words were sharp, meant to wound. Rachel heard them, but her expression remained neutral. She didn't respond, not with words, not with emotion. Instead, she absorbed the criticism, letting it fuel the fire within her. She knew the only valid response was to perform, and she intended to do so relentlessly. The instructor soon ushered them to the team log carry, a task designed to test not only strength, but coordination and leadership. A massive timber, heavy and unyielding, awaited them. The recruits groaned as they lifted it over their shoulders, arms straining and hands blistered. The tall recruit who had spoken earlier attempted to shift more weight toward Rachel, a subtle challenge meant to embarrass her. The moment slowed, almost in slow motion. Rachel adjusted her stance, braced her shoulders, and gritted her teeth. The log did not bow her. It became her instrument of silent assertion. She lifted it with unwavering determination, holding it steady while the others struggled, and moved forward with perfect rhythm. The waves crashed against their legs, salt stinging eyes, sand grinding under boots. Rachel felt her muscles scream, but she ignored it. Her focus was absolute. Keep the log moving, keep the team moving, endure. When one of the men began to stumble, panic creeping across his face, she did something unexpected. She bore his share of the weight, shifting the log so he could stabilize. He looked at her, a flicker of shame in his eyes. Rachel didn't speak. She merely kept moving. Her action conveyed far more than words could. By mid-afternoon, the recruits' exhaustion was palpable. Several had blisters forming on their hands, muscles trembling with fatigue, faces streaked with salt and sand. Yet Rachel's presence was steady, unwavering. She began to notice subtle shifts in the men's behavior. The tall recruit, once openly hostile, had begun to glance at her with something bordering on respect. Others whispered, not in mockery, but in astonishment at her endurance and skill. The instructors, ever watchful, nodded quietly to one another. Rachel was not simply surviving. She was setting the standard. The afternoon drill was a team obstacle sequence through mud and surf, designed to test endurance, agility, and coordination under extreme fatigue. The recruits were wading through icy water, climbing walls, crawling under barbed wire, and hauling themselves over slick, mud-coated beams. Rachel moved through the course with a balance of speed and precision, conserving energy while maintaining form. When one recruit lost his footing in the mud, she steadied him without hesitation. His eyes widened in surprise. No words were necessary. She had proven once again that strength was not just physical. Leadership, calm under pressure, and silent competence mattered just as much. As the day wore on, the recruits began murmuring among themselves. "She's incredible," one whispered. "She's doing everything we're struggling with?" "Maybe even better," another admitted reluctantly. Rachel didn't overhear every word, but she sensed the shift. Where there had been doubt, disbelief, and resentment, now there was a grudging recognition. She had begun to chip away at the walls of prejudice, not with confrontation, but with unwavering focus and performance. Then came the critical test of endurance and mental fortitude, the pool-based drown-proofing drill. The recruits were to submerge themselves, hands and feet bound, and float without panic. The first few men struggled visibly, gasping, coughing, flailing. Rachel approached calmly, her mind sharpening into a singular focus. When she entered the water, cold and unyielding, she allowed the panic to brush against her mind, then let it pass. Every stroke was controlled, every movement deliberate. She felt the water press against her lungs and chest, yet her body obeyed her mind's command with fluid, almost effortless precision. Minutes stretched like hours as she moved underwater, emerging with a calm, composed breath. The instructor's eyes flicked toward one another, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Even the skeptical recruits, watching from the side, could not hide their astonishment. Rachel's mastery of her own body, her calm under extreme duress, and her unwavering determination in the face of exhaustion and fear were undeniable. By the late afternoon, the team returned to the sand, drenched, exhausted, and humbled. Rachel's silent strength had altered the dynamics among the recruits. Some looked at her with awe, others with newfound respect. Even the tall, initially hostile recruit nodded at her briefly, a small but powerful gesture of acknowledgement. For the first time, she was no longer just the anomaly among them. She was a formidable presence, a competitor, a leader in her own right. As evening approached, the instructors gathered the team for debriefing. They praised effort, endurance, and teamwork, but the unspoken message was clear. Only results mattered. Words of doubt held no power here. Only action, performance, and perseverance earned recognition. Rachel absorbed the praise quietly, her thoughts already on the next day, the next challenge, the next test that would push her body and mind to extremes. That night, as the recruits settled into their bunks, sore, exhausted, and reflective, Rachel remained awake for a while, staring at the ceiling. She replayed the day in her mind, every sprint, every obstacle, every critical decision. She thought of the tall recruit, the skeptical whispers, and the silent nods of recognition. She allowed herself a brief, private sense of satisfaction, not in arrogance, but in acknowledgement that she had begun to earn her place. Tomorrow would be harder. Hell Week loomed, a gauntlet designed to crush spirit as much as body. But Rachel Hayes was not here to be crushed. She was here to endure, to lead, and to prove, step by relentless step, that she belonged among the Navy SEALs. By the time the lights went out across the training compound, a subtle transformation had occurred. Among the 12 recruits, doubt had begun to yield to respect. Rachel, though weary, knew the journey ahead would test her further, and she was ready. In the crucible of Coronado Bay, the first cracks in prejudice were forming, and she would shatter them completely. Because this was more than training. This was a proving ground, and Rachel Hayes had already begun to prove herself. The sun had barely risen over Coronado Bay when the recruits gathered at the edge of the pool complex, a concrete expanse glistening with cold, unforgiving water. The instructors' voices rang out across the morning air, sharp as a blade. Today, you will face a test of endurance, composure, and control. Failure is visible. Fear is fatal. Survive or you go home. The 12 recruits shifted nervously, some grimacing at the thought of being submerged, hands and feet bound, forced to rely entirely on mental control and technique. Rachel Hayes stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the water. She could feel the icy chill seeping into her boots and creeping up her legs. But fear did not touch her. Her body had been conditioned to respond to stress and exhaustion. Her mind was clear, calm, and focused, honed by months of grueling preparation and years of rigorous service. Today was not about proving she was a woman in a man's world. Today was about proving she could control herself when all logic screamed to panic. The recruits were given their instructions. They were to submerge completely, floating and maneuvering underwater while bound, relying solely on practiced technique to breathe and stay calm. Those who failed panicked, struggled, and were forced to restart, or worse, were pulled from the exercise entirely. The air was thick with tension. Even among the seasoned men, fear flickered in eyes wide with anticipation. Rachel, however, felt only focus. She watched as one of the recruits, a broad-shouldered young man named Jensen, entered the water first. Instantly, his legs kicked frantically, his arms flailed, and panic etched his features. The instructor intervened, pulling him to the surface, shaking his head. "Calm," the instructor barked. "Control is everything. Fear kills." The next recruit fared slightly better, but hesitation lingered in his strokes. Each failure added a layer of pressure in the air, a reminder that underwater survival was not just physical, but mental. Rachel adjusted her goggles and stepped to the edge. She inhaled deeply, feeling the cool mist of the pool on her face. Her heart rate, elevated from the morning's warm-up, steadied. She reviewed her movements in her mind, hands locked, legs aligned, buoyancy controlled. Panic had no place here. Only calm, only precision. She lowered herself into the water, the chill shocking her skin, and then sank beneath the surface, fully submerged. For a moment, silence surrounded her. The world above became distant, muffled sounds, shadowed figures. Her lungs filled and emptied with disciplined rhythm, every movement controlled. The water pressed against her chest, cold and unyielding, but her mind remained anchored. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. The other recruits and instructors watched intently, some holding their breath as they witnessed her composure. Not a flinch, not a gasp, not a misstep. Rachel moved with fluid precision, defying expectation with each stroke. Underwater, she faced the mental onslaught that made this exercise infamous. Fear of drowning, claustrophobia, the panic that threatened to override logic. She acknowledged it, recognized its presence, and then let it pass. Her body responded automatically, muscles and nerves firing in perfect sequence. She kicked, turned, and floated with grace, her mind a fortress against the natural instinct to panic. Every movement was deliberate, every breath a controlled decision. Time seemed endless. Her lungs burned, but her mind did not waver. She surfaced briefly to reset, then slipped back beneath, eyes wide open, scanning the dimly lit bottom of the pool. Around her, the other recruits either struggled or had already failed, their bodies tense, minds teetering on the edge of panic. Rachel's performance was a study in calm under pressure, a demonstration of the truth that fear could be mastered, not denied, and strength lay as much in composure as in muscle. When she finally emerged, gasping for air yet composed, a murmur ran through the pool deck. The instructor's eyes, sharp and discerning, acknowledged her performance with subtle nods. Even the recruits who had doubted her began to see what she had been demonstrating from day one: relentless skill, unwavering focus, and the capacity to lead under pressure. One of the previously skeptical men whispered under his breath, She's incredible." Rachel didn't respond. There was no need for words. The lesson had been delivered silently, with undeniable proof. She had faced fear directly, and had not only survived, but excelled. The instructors called the next recruit forward, but by now, the atmosphere had shifted. The initial skepticism, the whispered doubts, the subtle judgments, all of it had begun to erode under the weight of her performance. Respect, grudging and quiet at first, began to take root. By midday, the water exercises expanded into endurance swims, requiring recruits to navigate against strong currents while fully bound. Rachel moved with fluidity, conserving energy while maintaining pace. Several recruits began to falter, coughing, sputtering, and slowing to a crawl. Rachel's calm, controlled presence beside them acted almost as a stabilizing force, a silent reminder of what mastery over body and mind could accomplish. She finished each segment with composed grace, never letting fatigue or the bite of cold water show weakness. After hours in the pool, the recruits were finally allowed to exit. Shivering, exhausted yet alive, they huddled in small groups, sharing whispered observations. Rachel moved quietly to the edge, removing her goggles and shaking water from her hair. She felt the sting of salt on her skin and the ache in her muscles, but the internal sense of accomplishment was profound. For the first time, some of the recruits approached her, offering quiet nods of acknowledgement, no words needed. Her performance had spoken louder than any argument, any boast, or any doubt. As the day drew to a close, the instructors gathered the group for a debrief. They emphasized endurance, mental control, and composure. Rachel listened quietly, absorbing every word. She was beginning to understand the intricate psychology of SEAL training. The body could be pushed to its limits, but it was the mind, unwavering, unshakable, disciplined, that determined survival. The lessons learned today would echo in the days ahead. During sleep deprivation, grueling surf runs, and the relentless tests that awaited during Hell Week. That evening, as Rachel sat alone at the water's edge, staring at the waves reflecting the setting sun, she felt a profound sense of clarity. The recruits had begun to respect her. The instructors had acknowledged her skill, and she had proven more than ever that physical ability alone did not define a SEAL. Mental fortitude, composure, and relentless perseverance were equally crucial. She reflected on the day's trials and realized that the true battle had been fought in the mind. And in that battle, she had already won. Rachel knew tomorrow would be no less grueling. The team log carries, obstacle runs, and surf drills would intensify. But she had set a precedent, not with words, but with quiet, undeniable mastery of herself. The 12 recruits had witnessed her skill firsthand, and a subtle shift had occurred. They no longer saw her merely as an outsider. They saw a competitor, a leader, a warrior. As darkness fell over Coronado Bay, the night air cool and damp against her skin, Rachel allowed herself a brief, private moment of satisfaction. The day had been grueling, exhausting, and punishing, yet she had emerged intact, stronger in body, sharper in mind, and unwavering in spirit. Tomorrow, the challenges would only grow, but Rachel Hayes was ready. In the crucible of SEAL training, respect had begun to be earned, and she had laid the foundation. The first cracks of prejudice were appearing, subtle, yet undeniable. And Rachel, unshaken and resolute, would continue to prove that she belonged, every step, every stroke, every decision. Because this was not just training. This was a proving ground. And Rachel Hayes was proving herself in every sense. The sun had barely risen over Coronado Bay when the bugle's shrill call pierced the morning air. It was the start of Hell Week, the grueling crucible that had broken countless aspiring SEALs before her. Rachel Hayes swung her legs over the edge of her bunk, muscles sore and bruised from the previous days of training, and rose with practiced discipline. Every fiber of her being knew what awaited. 5 days of near-constant physical exertion, sleep deprivation, frigid surf, relentless drills, and mental pressure designed to crush the weak. There would be no mercy. The 12 recruits gathered silently at the training grounds, faces pale, bodies taut with anticipation. Rachel could feel the tension among them, a mixture of dread, fatigue, and adrenaline. Some had begun to respect her. Others were still adjusting to the notion that she belonged in the same ranks, moving with the same ferocity and precision. Today, there would be no room for doubt. Every action, every step, every choice would be scrutinized. The first drill began immediately. A surf run into the freezing Pacific Ocean. Waves slammed against their legs, the chill biting through their wetsuits, muscles screaming against the effort. Rachel surged forward with calm determination, her movements economical yet powerful. The others struggled to maintain her pace, some flailing in frustration, others slipping in the wet sand. She had long since learned to embrace pain, to use it as a measure of her own strength rather than a signal to quit. After the surf run came a mud crawl beneath barbed wire, the ground uneven and soaked, the air thick with the smell of salt, sweat, and raw determination. Recruits groaned as they dragged themselves through the muck, some panicking at the wire overhead. Rachel moved like a machine, low, efficient, deliberate. When one recruit became stuck in the mud, she paused for a heartbeat, then hoisted him forward without hesitation, her strength and resolve unmatched. His eyes widened in surprise. No words were necessary. Actions spoke louder than judgments or doubts. Hours bled into one another, each drill more punishing than the last. Rope climbed slick with seawater, log carries through surf and sand, and team drills where failure meant punishment for all. Rachel's body ached from every angle, but she refused to falter. Pain, exhaustion, and fear were constants now, but they could not dictate her performance. With each challenge she completed, she set a standard, quietly asserting her competence and leadership without needing to announce it. By midday, a moment of crisis occurred. One of the male recruits collapsed mid-run, muscles seized, face pale, unable to continue. The instructors barked orders to leave him behind, testing the team's ability to make rapid decisions under pressure. Rachel did not hesitate. She lifted his pack, adjusted his gear, and began dragging him alongside the group, forcing him to maintain forward motion. The other recruits paused, stunned by her strength and determination. They had expected weakness, delay, hesitation, but Rachel's actions shattered their assumptions. The instructors observed silently, nodding subtly. They recognized what Rachel had already proven countless times before. Leadership was not earned by rank or bravado. It was earned by action, courage, and the ability to protect and propel your team forward under the harshest conditions. The recruits, once skeptical and judgmental, began to shift their perception. They saw her not as an anomaly, not as a woman intruding on their world, but as a competitor, a warrior, and a leader. The afternoon brought a series of mental endurance drills, exercises designed to push recruits beyond the point of physical collapse. Tasks that required problem-solving while bodies trembled from exhaustion. Navigation exercises through unrelenting surf. And timed carries of heavy equipment tested not only physical strength, but focus, strategy, and composure. Rachel's mind remained razor-sharp. She directed her own movements efficiently, offering silent guidance to nearby recruits when necessary, never condescending, never seeking approval, just ensuring the mission continued. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the final test of the day approached. A grueling night surf run, a test of stamina, cohesion, and sheer willpower. The recruits plunged into freezing waters, muscles burning with fatigue, lungs screaming for air. Rachel led the pack, moving with a combination of precision and relentless force. The waves crashed over her, pulling, pushing, testing every ounce of her strength and determination. Around her, the recruits followed, some inspired by her pace, some dragged forward by her silent leadership. During the night run, one of the recruits faltered completely, panic threatening to overtake him in the icy surf. Rachel didn't hesitate. She reached for him, guided him, and kept moving, ensuring he didn't sink into despair or defeat. Her actions were decisive, immediate, and fearless. The instructors observed silently. This was the hallmark of SEAL, not just physical endurance, but the ability to lead, protect, and inspire under conditions of extreme duress. By the time the team staggered out of the surf and onto the sand, exhaustion had taken its toll. Limbs trembled uncontrollably, breaths came in ragged gasps, and minds teetered on the brink of collapse. Yet Rachel stood tall, even in fatigue, her eyes scanning the team, silently assessing, ready for the next challenge. The 12 recruits, previously doubtful, now looked at her with a mixture of awe, respect, and quiet admiration. She had earned it, not by words, not by insistence, but by relentless action. That night, as they huddled in shivering formation on the wet sand, Rachel reflected quietly on the day's trials. The physical pain, the mental strain, the psychological games played by both instructors and peers, all were part of a greater purpose. Survival, leadership, and respect in SEAL training were not gifts. They were earned through relentless perseverance. She felt a profound sense of clarity. Endurance was about more than strength. It was about the will to rise, to continue, and to protect those around you, even when every instinct screamed to quit. Tomorrow would bring new trials, deeper exhaustion, and the relentless push of Hell Week. But Rachel Hayes was ready. She had proven herself today, not merely by surviving, but by excelling, by lifting others when needed. by embodying the principles of a true SEAL. The skeptical glances of yesterday had been replaced by acknowledgement, subtle but unmistakable. She had begun to shift the dynamics among the recruits, redefining what leadership, courage, and determination looked like in real time. As the waves whispered against the shore and the stars began to emerge in the night sky, Rachel allowed herself a brief, private moment of satisfaction. The day had been punishing, relentless, and unyielding, yet she had faced every trial with calm precision and unbroken spirit. The journey ahead would test her further, but she had laid the foundation. She had endured, led, and earned respect. In the crucible of Hell Week, Rachel Hayes was no longer just surviving. She was commanding, quietly but undeniably, the respect of her peers and instructors alike. She had become a force unshakable in mind and body, ready for whatever the next challenge would throw her way. Because this was not merely training. This was a proving ground. And Rachel Hayes was proving, in every way, that she belonged. The morning fog clung to Coronado Bay like a thick, gray curtain as the 12 recruits assembled, bodies trembling with exhaustion, muscles screaming from days of relentless Hell Week. Rachel Hayes stood among them, her own body bruised, scraped, and blistered. Yet her eyes shone with a calm determination that seemed to radiate over the group. Today would be the final test, the culmination of everything they had endured. This was the moment designed to expose weakness, break confidence, and separate the truly exceptional from those who simply survived. The instructors formed a circle around them, faces unreadable, eyes sharp with scrutiny. You've endured, you've survived, but endurance alone does not define a SEAL, one marked. Today, you will face a test of skill, instinct, and combat readiness. It's a simulation. 12 recruits versus 1. Only 1 minute. You will see who can think, react, and dominate under pressure. No excuses. No mercy. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Every recruit's pulse raced, adrenaline spiking in anticipation and fear. Rachel's mind sharpened instantly. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. The rules were simple: survive, evade, and neutralize the threat, even if that threat was 12 highly trained, desperate men, her peers in everything but survival instinct. For a moment, the world narrowed to a pinpoint of clarity. Her body remembered every drill, every reflex honed during months of preparation. The lessons of Hell Week, the endurance, the mental control, the drown-proofing, it all converged into a single purpose: excellence under pressure. The whistle blew. Instantly, chaos erupted. The 12 men lunged, circled, struck. The air was thick with dust and grit from the sand beneath their feet. Every movement fast, calculated, and deadly serious. Rachel reacted with lightning precision. Her strikes were deliberate, fluid, and devastating. She moved with a combination of agility and brute strength, using leverage, balance, and instinct honed to perfection. Every attack she faced was countered. Every opening she saw was exploited with ruthless efficiency. The recruits were trained, yes, but they had underestimated her. A sideways glance, a flick of a wrist, a drop of her body. Each motion carried the weight of experience, strategy, and focus. She dodged a sweeping kick from one man, swept his legs from under him, and sent him sprawling. Another lunged from the side. She anticipated it, pivoted, and redirected his momentum against him. Her movements were a study in efficiency, each second precious, each motion perfect. Minutes stretched like seconds, every heartbeat a reminder of the stakes. Rachel didn't think about exhaustion, pain, or the bruises forming across her body. She only acted, reacted, adapted, and moved. Her eyes scanned constantly, calculating angles, predicting momentum, balancing offense and defense. The other recruits, skilled though they were were caught off guard by her speed, timing, and sheer decisiveness. One by one, they found themselves disarmed, evaded, or momentarily neutralized by the precision of her movements. Around her, the instructors watched silently, stopwatch in hand. The recruits were fierce, desperate, driven by competition and pride. But Rachel's focus, calm under the most extreme pressure, was unmatched. She moved like a force of nature, every strike, every pivot, every evasion perfectly timed. Within the first 20 seconds, several of the men were off balance, exhausted from miscalculating her speed and skill. Rachel barely registered fatigue. Her mind and body were in perfect sync, trained to respond instinctively. By the 30-second mark, the tide had fully turned. The remaining recruits circled cautiously, more aware now of her abilities than their own confidence. The air was tense, filled with the sound of gasps, sand scuffing, and rapid breathing. Rachel's heart pounded, but not from fear. It was pure focus, pure control, the culmination of months of training and years of preparation. Each second brought her closer to proving not only her survival, but her undeniable mastery. 40 seconds. That's all it took. 40 seconds to neutralize, evade, and dominate the 12 recruits who had once doubted her presence, capability, and resolve. When the whistle blew again, the room fell silent. 12 men, skilled, trained, and desperate, lay temporarily defeated around her. Rachel stood in the center, chest heaving, bruised and bloodied, but unbroken. Her gaze swept across the group, acknowledging each man's effort silently. She had not sought glory, only the proof of skill, endurance, and composure. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, almost imperceptibly, one of the recruits began to clap. The sound was hesitant at first, then louder until the entire group erupted into cheers, some of them shouting, some simply staring in awe. Rachel didn't smile. She remained composed, quietly acknowledging the instructors with a crisp salute. Her body ached, her muscles screamed, yet her mind was calm. She had proven, without argument, that she belonged among the best, that she was every bit as capable as any man present. The instructors nodded approvingly. "Well done, Hayes," one said. The words were simple, but their weight was immense. Rachel allowed herself a deep breath, scanning the faces of the 12 recruits. They no longer regarded her with doubt or skepticism. Their eyes reflected something deeper: recognition, respect, understanding. She had not only survived the test, she had redefined it. That evening, as the sun set over Coronado Bay, Rachel sat quietly on the beach, reflecting on the intensity of the day. The final test had demanded everything from her: endurance, strategy, instinct, and unshakable composure. She had given everything and, in return, had earned what mattered most in the crucible of Navy SEAL training: respect, earned through action, not words; mastery, proven through results; and a place that could never be questioned again. The 12 recruits who had circled her earlier in doubt now stood transformed. They were no longer merely peers. They were witnesses. Witnesses to the precision, strength, and resolve of a woman who had faced every assumption, every prejudice, and every physical and mental challenge with unyielding determination. For them, and for the instructors, Rachel Hayes had proven that mastery was not defined by gender, but by will, skill, and the courage to act under pressure. The night air was cool and bracing, waves lapping softly against the shore. Rachel allowed herself a brief, private smile. She had survived, dominated, and earned her place, not with prideful display, but with quiet, undeniable proof. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, yet this pivotal moment, the 40-second test, would be remembered forever. It was the day she transformed from a recruit into a living testament of perseverance, skill, and unbreakable will. Rachel knew one truth with absolute clarity: the journey was far from over. Hell Week had forged her body and mind. The final test had validated her skill and endurance. And the 12 recruits, now her brothers in arms, had witnessed her capabilities firsthand. Respect had been earned, skepticism shattered, and legacy quietly established. And in 40 seconds, Rachel Hayes had proven something far more profound than survival. She had proven that strength, skill, and resolve are limitless when combined with unshakable focus and determination. The early morning sun broke over Coronado Bay, casting long golden streaks across the sand. Rachel Hayes stood quietly near the water's edge, muscles still aching from the previous day's grueling 40-second test against 12 highly trained peers. Around her, the 12 recruits gathered, their expressions a mixture of awe, pride, and something deeper, a profound respect that only comes after shared hardship and undeniable proof of skill. The night after the test had been filled with hushed conversations, whispered acknowledgments, and subtle gestures of respect. The recruits, once doubtful, now approached Rachel with cautious admiration, some even offering small nods and reluctant smiles. It was the unspoken bond of warriors who had tested one another under pressure, who had faced the edge of exhaustion, fear, and possibility, and survived. Rachel had emerged not just unscathed, but dominant, a leader forged in the crucible of extreme challenge. The instructors called the team together for the post-test debrief, their voices firm, disciplined, yet tinged with rare approval. "Hayes," one began, scanning the group, "you have demonstrated extraordinary control, skill, and leadership. The SEAL community values competence over all else, and today you proved competence beyond measure." The other instructors nodded in agreement, their silence conveying more than words ever could. Rachel listened, absorbing the praise without arrogance. She understood that validation in this world came from action, not applause, and her performance had earned it in full. Around her, the other recruits reflected quietly on the events of Hell Week. Some were still struggling to comprehend how she had dominated the final test, yet they could not deny it. They had seen her move with unmatched speed, precision, and calm under pressure, qualities many of them were still striving to achieve. One of the previously skeptical recruits, Jensen, approached her with a mixture of humility and awe. I misjudged you," he admitted. "You didn't just keep up. You led us. I didn't think it was possible." Rachel's response was simple. A nod. No boast, no unnecessary explanation. Her performance had spoken louder than any words ever could. The rest of the day unfolded with celebratory, yet disciplined tasks, swimming drills, team coordination exercises, and reflection periods. Rachel moved through each activity with the same precision and focus as before, yet there was a subtle difference now. Her confidence was no longer defensive. It was earned. Every glance from the recruits acknowledged her skill. Every command respected her authority. She had transformed the perception of what it meant to be a SEAL in their eyes, not just through endurance, but through composure, intelligence, and decisive action under pressure. During a particularly grueling team log carry through the surf, Rachel noticed the subtle shifts in the group dynamics. The men moved differently around her now, instinctively adjusting to her presence, anticipating her actions, and matching her pace. Where there had been hesitation, doubt, or resentment, now there was synergy, cohesion, and trust. She had become, without intending to dominate, a natural leader, someone who inspired by example, not command. Later, during a break, Rachel sat with a few of the recruits, discussing the challenges they had faced over the past week. They spoke honestly, admitting fears, struggles, and moments of near collapse. Rachel shared her own reflections, not as boast, but as shared experience. She spoke of fear management during drown-proofing drills, the mental strategies she used to maintain composure, and how she relied on observation and anticipation during the 40-second test. The recruits listened intently, some taking notes mentally, others absorbing silently. For the first time, gender held no relevance in their assessment. Only skill, determination, and leadership mattered. As afternoon stretched into evening, the instructors gathered the group for a final evaluation and recognition ceremony. The recruits, worn and exhausted, stood in formation while Rachel stepped forward. Her posture was firm, her gaze steady, reflecting the calm resilience that had defined her every action throughout Hell Week. The instructors addressed the group, detailing accomplishments, highlighting endurance, teamwork, and skill. When they spoke of Rachel, their words carried weight and respect. Hayes has consistently demonstrated mastery of skills, leadership under extreme pressure, and resilience that sets a benchmark for all recruits. The 12 recruits, who had doubted, tested, and even challenged her, now watched with silent acknowledgement. No one clapped, no one cheered loudly. That was not the way of SEALs. Respect was quiet, internal, and earned. And Rachel had earned it in full. One by one, the men approached her after the ceremony, offering nods, firm handshakes, and quiet words of acknowledgement. "You're one of us," Jensen said finally. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of inclusion, respect, and acceptance. That night, as Rachel lay on the sand under a blanket, gazing at the stars over Coronado Bay, she reflected on the week's journey. Every challenge, every grueling drill, every moment of doubt and pain had built her into someone stronger, sharper, and more capable than before. The 12 recruits who had surrounded her at the beginning, questioning her presence and ability, were now allies, witnesses to her endurance, and participants in a journey that had transformed all of them. She thought back to the 40-second showdown, the pivotal moment when she had faced 12 peers simultaneously. That moment had crystallized everything: months of training, years of preparation, mental fortitude, and physical conditioning. In those 40 seconds, she had demonstrated the essence of what it meant to be a SEAL: mastery over fear, precision in action, and leadership under pressure. The result was undeniable. Respect was earned, skepticism shattered, and her place among them solidified. The camaraderie of shared struggle became apparent as conversations continued late into the night. Recruits recounted moments when they faltered, when Rachel had instinctively guided or steadied them. They shared laughter over small, absurd moments, and they silently acknowledged the weight of the challenges they had faced together. Rachel listened more than she spoke, observing, absorbing, and understanding that leadership was as much about influence as it was about action. She had become an anchor for the group, quietly commanding their respect without arrogance. As the moon rose over Coronado Bay, Rachel allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. She had faced skepticism, prejudice, and physical extremes, and had emerged not only unbroken, but respected, admired, and included. Her presence was no longer questioned. She had proven her worth repeatedly, under circumstances that demanded more than mere survival. She had proven herself SEAL, not in theory, not by assumption, but by performance. The night was calm, the surf gentle, and the air thick with the unspoken bond of warriors who had endured together. Rachel reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the months of preparation, the years of discipline, and the relentless drive to push beyond perceived limits. Every bruise, every blister, every sleepless hour had been a step toward this moment: recognition, respect, and inclusion in the brotherhood of SEALs. By the early hours of the morning, the 12 recruits and Rachel Hayes rested quietly, bodies and minds exhausted, but spirits strong. The bond forged in Hell Week was undeniable. They were no longer merely recruits. They were comrades, witnesses, and participants in a journey that had tested the very limits of human endurance and determination. Rachel's journey, though far from over, had reached a pivotal moment. She had transformed perception, shattered doubt, and solidified her place among the elite. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new exercises, and new tests of endurance. But Rachel Hayes knew one truth with unwavering clarity. She had proven herself in the most extreme conditions, earned the respect of her peers, and established herself as a formidable force within the SEAL training environment. Her journey was ongoing, but her place was now undeniable, solid, and earned through skill, perseverance, and unbreakable resolve. In the quiet of the night, with the waves whispering softly against the shore, Rachel closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the weight of her accomplishment. Respect had been earned. Skepticism had been silenced. And she had proven beyond any doubt that strength, determination, and skill know no boundaries. Rachel Hayes was no longer just a recruit. She was a SEAL in every sense that truly mattered. The first light of dawn painted Coronado Bay in shades of gold and silver. The air was crisp, tinged with salt and the faint scent of sweat, sand, and determination. Hell Week had ended. 12 exhausted, battle-tested recruits and one extraordinary woman stood together, their bodies battered, minds stretched, and spirits forged into steel. Rachel Hayes, bruised, bloodied, and unbroken, surveyed the horizon with a calm, measured satisfaction. She had endured every trial, every test, and every moment of doubt, and now, finally, she stood victorious, not in arrogance, but in undeniable proof of her ability, courage, and resilience. The final ceremony commenced on the sand, instructors in crisp formation, recruits lined up, eyes forward. The air buzzed with exhaustion, tension, and the faint thrill of achievement. Rachel stood at the center of her team, shoulders squared, eyes steady, embodying the essence of a SEAL, precision, composure, and unyielding determination. Instructors spoke of the challenges, the feats of endurance, and the extraordinary performances that had defined the week. Rachel's name echoed through the proceedings, not as novelty, not as anomaly, but as excellence recognized and earned. She remembered the first day she had stepped into training, flanked by 12 skeptical peers. Doubt had lingered like a shadow in their eyes, doubt that she could match, much less surpass, their skill, endurance, and toughness. Today, those doubts were gone. Each recruit who had once whispered skepticism now looked at her with respect, admiration, and a quiet acknowledgement of her accomplishments. They had witnessed her dominate, lead, and endure when circumstances demanded perfection, courage, and resilience. As the instructors called forward individuals for final recognition, Rachel's peers stepped forward one by one. Each shook hands, nodded in acknowledgement, and in subtle ways paid tribute to her presence. One of the previously skeptical recruits, Jensen, approached last, his hand extended, firm and deliberate. "You earned this, Hayes," he said quietly. "Every step, every drill, you earned it." No words could capture the intensity of the respect in his eyes, the grudging yet sincere acknowledgement of skill, leadership, and resilience. Rachel accepted the gesture with the calm dignity that had defined her every move throughout the week. In her mind, Rachel reflected on the moments that had brought her here. The cold, punishing surf of the early days. The drown-proofing drills. That had tested the very limits of mental and physical control. The relentless obstacle courses that demanded every ounce of strength, endurance, and strategy. She remembered the pivotal 40-second showdown, when she had faced 12 highly trained recruits in a test of speed, instinct, and tactical skill. In that brief but decisive moment, she had demonstrated not just survival, but mastery. A demonstration that had forever shifted the perception of her peers and instructors alike. Rachel knew that her journey had been more than a personal challenge. It had been a demonstration of what is possible when determination, preparation, and mental fortitude converge. Her presence, once questioned, had become a standard of excellence. She had shattered assumptions, defied expectations, and left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed her performance. She had proven that capability, courage, and leadership are defined not by gender, but by resilience, skill, and the willingness to rise under pressure. The final challenge of Hell Week was a symbolic team exercise, designed not just to test physical prowess, but cohesion, trust, and leadership. The recruits, including Rachel, moved as a single unit, carrying heavy loads through the surf, coordinating their steps and supporting one another through exhaustion and pain. Rachel's leadership, subtle yet unmistakable, guided the team. She didn't command. She influenced through example, instinct, and decisiveness. The recruits followed, instinctively aligning with her rhythm, trusting her decisions, and respecting her ability to lead under extreme conditions. As the team reached the final marker, exhaustion etched deep into every face, Rachel paused for a brief moment. She looked at the 12 recruits, men who had doubted, challenged, and tested her. Their faces reflected relief, pride, and a newfound respect. She had earned more than recognition. She had earned their trust, their acknowledgement, and their admiration. In that moment, she understood that leadership is not declared. It is proven, repeatedly, in moments of extreme pressure and consequence. The instructors called the team together for a final address. This week was designed to test every aspect of your skill, endurance, and character, one said. Few completed. Fewer excel. Hayes demonstrated leadership, precision, and resilience at a level that sets a benchmark for all of you. Take note, excellence is earned, not given. The words echoed over the surf, carrying a weight that resonated with every recruit. For Rachel, the recognition was satisfying but secondary. She had already proven to herself what mattered most. That capability, focus, and courage are universal measures of excellence. Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Rachel sat on the sand alone, reflecting on the journey. The bruises, blisters, and exhaustion were temporary. The lessons, endurance, and self-confidence were permanent. She recalled the moments of doubt, both her own and others, and recognized how far she had come. Every step, every challenge, every grueling exercise had built her into a stronger, more capable warrior. The trials of Hell Week had tested not just her body, but her mind, her spirit, and her resolve. And she had emerged not just intact, but triumphant. The 12 recruits approached quietly, forming a semicircle around her. Their expressions were a mixture of gratitude, respect, and camaraderie. One spoke first. "We misjudged you at the start," he said. "But you led, you endured, and you proved what it means to be a CAL. You didn't just survive Hell Week, you set the standard for us all." There were nods and murmurs of agreement. Rachel smiled faintly, acknowledging them without pride. Respect, she knew, was earned in action, not words. And this acknowledgement, given freely by those who had tested her, meant more than any ceremony. As the team left the beach, Rachel remained for a moment longer, gazing at the water. She felt the weight of the journey behind her and the promise of future challenges ahead. Hell Week had ended, but the path of a SEAL is never truly complete. Each mission, each exercise, each test of endurance is another opportunity to prove oneself, to protect, to lead, and to excel. Rachel knew that the lessons learned here, discipline, composure, resilience, and the power of action over assumption, would carry her forward, shaping every step of her career and every challenge she faced. In the quiet of the evening, Rachel reflected on what she had achieved. She had entered this week as one among many, doubted and questioned. She had left it as a symbol of endurance, skill, and leadership, a living testament to the values of the SEALs. Every recruit, every instructor, every challenge had contributed to her journey. And in 40 seconds, she had crystallized everything she had learned into a moment that would be remembered, a demonstration of skill, courage, and undeniable capability. The waves whispered against the shore, a quiet rhythm echoing the journey Rachel had taken. She rose to her feet, the sand shifting beneath her boots, and took one last look at the horizon. In that moment, she understood something profound. Strength is measured not just in muscle or stamina, but in courage, focus, and the unyielding determination to act decisively under pressure. And she had embodied that truth every step of the way. Rachel Hayes walked away from Coronado Bay that evening, not as a recruit still seeking approval, but as a SEAL who had earned her place through action, perseverance, and unshakable resolve. The 12 recruits who had surrounded her, the instructors who had watched every move, and the memory of every challenge she had overcome would forever attest to her triumph. She had faced every test, every doubt, and every barrier, and she had proven, beyond question, that she belonged. Her journey was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. Respect had been earned, skepticism had been shattered, and a legacy had begun, a testament to what can be achieved with focus, courage, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Rachel Hayes had entered as one among many. She left as a SEAL, respected, proven, and unbreakable.